Hey, what's going on, you guys? I'm going to be talking about in this video lo-fi hip-hop drums, how you create them, process them into a track. This is sort of a more abridged version of an earlier video. I recently put out a much longer, comprehensive drum tutorial about lo-fi hip-hop drums. If you're interested in something a little more comprehensive, check that out. In this video, we're just going to be taking an example track. I'm going to go over the 3 main points I think you should cover when you're trying to get this sound. Okay, so right off the bat, you could tell the drums are very punchy, they're clear, they're sort of in front of the mix. That's a very specific sound that you can get with your drums in this style of track. I would say the 3 things that are very important are the sounds that you pick, how you process them, and how you put them into groups or bus paths for sort of rounding out the sidechain compression, the ducking, and sort of finishing those sounds out. Let's just solo the drums here, and you could tell just by looking at my session the way I'm using groups. In Ableton Live and other DAWs, you can select certain tracks, hold down Shift-click to select the tracks, hit Command-G or Control-G, and that creates a group, which is basically a bus path. That's a term you might recognize from Pro Tools and other DAWs, where we're basically consolidating the lanes or the paths of the audio from those tracks into one area. So everything's being sent to one destination. This is really important for more mixing techniques and routing techniques when you're finishing off a track especially. So here I have a drums group. If I go into my kick and solo that, we could take a listen to what these sounds actually are and how I came up with them. And you can see there's basically not much really happening in the upper frequencies. This is giving the kick more of a guttural sound. It's also very punchy and short. It doesn't have much decay to it at all. You can see we have a big bump here around 65, 70 hertz. That's pretty typical. It's basically a simple, short, punchy sub kick, which is very typical for this style of music. If we take a look at the snare, we can see I only have one plugin actually doing anything on here. It's basically like a band pass. I'm taking a high cut and a low cut. I'm sort of leaving the mid-range in. And that's also a very typical aspect to snare drums. It's basically a very short rim shot. I call it a snare, but in reality, you would look at this as more of a rim shot sound. It's also being combined with a clap, and this sound has quite a bit of processing on it. So let's take a listen to just the clap. So processing lo-fi sounds is a really interesting thing. You could see that I started off with an EQ where I'm basically taking off the highs and the lows, similar to what I did to the snare. But then I'm using this thing called Isotope Trash 2. This is basically an advanced distortion plugin. And primarily what I do with Trash is I use the convolve feature here, which gives me these sort of presets that are really great for adding lo-fi textures. They're called classic textures. And these are all just basically the sounds that you'd expect from some kind of old broken gear. So this is what it sounds like after the EQ, but before Trash. Now with it. So it sort of took away a lot of frequencies, it made it a little bit phasier, and it just sort of changed the texture of the sound. And then I'm sending that through Decapitator, which is a saturator plugin, to basically add more harmonics to it and a little more distortion to the signal. You'll notice though it's still quite bright. So what I do then is I add basically almost the carbon copy of the previous EQ from the beginning. So I'm filtering it back down after I've changed the harmonics and the texture of the sound to get it back in the frequency range that I want it to be in. And I'm also doing this while I'm listening to it combined with the snare, because this is creating sort of that flam element, which is very typical to lo-fi hip-hop, where the snare sound, let's just call it in general, is sometimes a compilation of more than one sound. You can see we have this rim shot style snare and then the clap happening together. And the clap is more of a stereo sound, and the rim shot or the snare is more of a mono front and center kind of sound. And when they're combined together, they're almost flamming. So when they're combined together, you get this. Nothing's actually happening on this drum group, but essentially I send everything to a drum group for ducking. You can see in my track with all the other musical elements, everything that isn't the drums gets sent to one group. And basically I process all those things together with compression. So I want to take away some of the transient peaks of that sound and sort of smooth it over. I use a lot of times Slate Digital's virtual mix rack to do this. And then I send in the compressor, which is actually using the external feature here to duck. So every time the drum elements, the kick and the snare hit, this is going to duck out all the musical elements. And that creates that nice pumping effect that's so typical to lo-fi hip-hop tracks. And we can actually see that in action. In this case, I'm actually doing it when the kick and the snare hit. If you look at my master bus, I just have sort of a mastering style compressor that's doing a little bit of gain reduction, not a ton, usually half a dB. And then I have the limiters on just for increasing the volume. These aren't even on right now because I didn't want to have any clipping problems with Streamlabs. So yeah, that's basically it. That's how you put together your lo-fi drums to be punchy, clear in the mix. So hopefully this video was useful to you. If you're into music production topics like this, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos. And check the link in the description. We have a Gumroad store where there's a bunch of free stuff to check out. I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.